Hey guys, tonight we step back in time, way back, to the brittle, windswept winters of the medieval world. The kind where your breath freezes before it leaves your mouth and your fingers sting just from pushing open the cottage door. You're not royalty, you're not a knight in shining armor, you're the one making their bread, patching their tunics, and trudging home in boots that are basically wet sacks. And right now, your entire job is not dying of cold before the thaw. Outside, the sky's gone pale gray, and the trees are brittle skeletons clawing at the clouds. The air smells like smoke and frozen manure. You wrap a ragged shawl around your shoulders, feel the crunch of frost under your boots, and realize you probably won't survive this. But hey, let's try. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up with the tip of your nose frozen. That's the medieval version of an alarm clock. Your straw mattress is stiff, your breath is visible in your blanket. Wool, maybe, if you're lucky, doesn't do much against the chill. Outside, the village still sleeps, tucked between bare fields and snow-covered woods. You don't get to sleep in. Not now. Winter's here, and it doesn't knock, it barges in. The first frost came a week ago, maybe two. You remember the way it laced the garden like silver thread, beautiful and deadly. It meant the end of fresh anything. Now, the ground's too hard to dig, and you had to yank up the last sad-looking carrots like pulling teeth from a frozen skull. Winter isn't an event, it's a siege. You won't just get through it, you endure it. From now till spring, survival is 100 small decisions made right. Rationing that last sack of grain, nursing a cough before it becomes something worse, choosing whether to burn the last log now or save it for tomorrow's snowstorm. The sky doesn't smile anymore. Daylight is brief and watery, barely squeezing through cloud cover. Shadows come early and stretch long. You mark time by how many candles you've burned or how few you have left. Remember, there's no electricity, no central heating, and the closest thing you have to insulation is what? A landau walls stuffed with mud and luck. The village path is slick with ice and manure. You shuffle carefully past neighbors bundled like walking bundles of rags. There's no fashion here, just function. If your tunic has holes, you patch it. If your shoes fall apart, you wrap your feet in cloth and pray, and still the cold seeps in. It's clever that way, always finding a way to touch your bones. Your body adapts slowly. You learn where the wind cuts deepest, how to hunch your shoulders just right, how to hold your breath when crossing the stream so the cold doesn't knock the air from your lungs. Your skin chaps, your lips crack. But you stop noticing. It becomes background noise, like the distant bleating of sheep or the soft groaning of ice settling on the roof beams. You've stored what food you could. Root vegetables, mostly. They last longest, though they start to go soft and sprout weird little hairs after a while. Some dried peas. Maybe grain, if the harvest wasn't terrible. If you were part of a slightly wealthier peasant family, you might have meat hanging in the rafters, salted, smoked, barely edible by modern standards, but life-saving here. Otherwise, it's cabbage again. Yay! You check the sky. It's always a good idea. Storm clouds mean more than ruined plans. They mean collapsing roofs, frozen children, or another day where no one dares to open the door. Even the animals feel it. The chickens are quiet. The cow refuses to leave the stall. And the rats? They've moved in. You hear them scratching behind the woodpile at night. One of your neighbors died last week. Not dramatically. Just didn't wake up. Too old. Too cold. Too hungry. You passed the cottage and saw the door shut tight, a quiet sign that grief was inside. No funeral yet. The ground's too hard to bury the body. It'll wait in a corner, wrapped in a shroud until the thaw. That's not weird here, it's just logistics. The church bell rings thin and distant in the frozen air. Time for morning prayers. You tuck your hood up, mouth a silent curse, and head out. Everyone's breath is smoke. Everyone's eyes are tired. But there's something binding about it, this collective shivering. You're all stuck in this together, and somehow that makes it bearable. Almost. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants actually dreaded winter more than famine or war. But judging by your frozen toes and chapped fingers, this feels like a strong contender. At least there's one small upside. Bugs are gone. Remember summer, when lice ruled your scalp and fleas turned sleep into a nightmare? Gone. Frozen out. They'll be back, of course, like everything else that's horrible, but for now, your itchy skin gets a brief vacation. It's the medieval version of spa season. You pass the manor house on your way back, larger, sturdier, its chimney puffing smugly. They'll survive winter just fine. Their cellars are full, their cloaks are lined with fur, their walls are thick built with actual insulation. You, though, you'll survive if the rats don't get your grain, if the cough doesn't become pneumonia, and if the neighbors don't get too hungry. Back home, you sit by the hearth, such as it is. A shallow fire glows feebly, mostly smoke. The wood's damp, it always is, but you blow on it anyway. The kids huddle around you, noses red, eyes wide. You tell them stories, ones your grandfather told you, about winters where the snow was taller than a man, where wolves crept into barns, where angels walked the fields and whispered secrets to those who endured. It helps, not with the cold, but with the weight of it. Sometimes belief is the only heat you have. Your feet are still cold. No matter how many layers of straw you packed into your shoes last night, it barely helps. The cottage is a riddle of drafts, through the doorframe, up from the floor, even down the chimney when the wind blows wrong. And yet this place is your shield. Barely standing, barely warm, but it's what stands between you and the white death outside. This house, if you can call it that, isn't built for comfort. It's built because it had to be. Wattle and daub, woven sticks smeared with clay and dung, form the walls. The roof is thatch, layered bundles of straw that drip during heavy rain and freeze stiff when the snow piles on top. If you're lucky, there's a timber beam above your head. If not, hope your thatch doesn't collapse mid-blizzard. Your breath fogs in the air as you move around inside, every step stirring the packed earth floor. No wooden planks, no rugs, just hardened dirt that turns to slippery muck when the snow melts in. You've scattered fresh straw to soak up the moisture, and you'll sweep it out again in a week, if you can spare the energy. There's no separate bedroom. No privacy, really. Everyone sleeps in the same room, on the same floor, tucked together under a pile of blankets, cloaks, and whatever animal pelts you've scrounged over the years. The idea is simple. More bodies, more heat. Sometimes it's you and your spouse and 4 kids and the dog, and possibly a chicken or 2 if you're trying to keep their eggs from freezing solid. The hearth is your heart. Not a grand fireplace, just a low stone basin in the middle of the room with soot-blackened walls above. The smoke curls upward toward a hole in the roof if you've got one. Otherwise, the room fills with haze and everyone starts coughing. But it's worth it for a flicker of warmth. Firewood is precious. Too precious, actually. You remember the walk to gathering. Out past the edge of the village where the Lord's forest begins. Technically, you're not allowed to collect wood there. Those trees belong to him. But hunger and cold don't respect ownership, and neither do you when your children's hands are turning blue. You look for fallen branches first. Deadwood? Anything you can drag back without leaving too many footprints. One time, last winter, a man was caught with an axe in the Lord's grove. They made an example of him, tied to the stalks, fingers broken so he'd remember what they were for. You helped feed his wife while he recovered. She never thanked you. That's just how things work here. What you burn depends on what you have. Oak if you're blessed, pine if you're lucky, peat if you're desperate. Peat is this damp, mossy stuff you dig out of bogs, burns slow, smells foul. You hate it! But you burn it anyway. Dung too, animal droppings dried in the sun. It's not as bad as it sounds. Or maybe your nose has just stopped caring. There's a game you play every morning, deciding whether to burn now or wait. Mornings are worst when your joints ache and your teeth chatter. But if you burn your last logs now, what will you use tonight when the front one returns and presses its face against the windows again? Oh, right. Windows? You don't really have those. Just tiny slits or open holes covered with oiled cloth or maybe a wooden shutter. Glass is a luxury for the church or the manor. You're lucky to keep the wind out. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants felt a sense of ownership over their homes or if they were more like temporary shelters passed between generations. But as you patch a leak in the thatch with your own numbed hands, it certainly feels like yours, even if the land it sits on belongs to someone else. There's another problem: vermin. Rats chew through your food stores, mice scurry across your bed at night, spiders crawl in through every crack, and fleas, those are year-round companions, only slightly less active now. One of your kids got bitten so badly last month their skin puffed up like dough. You boiled their blanket. It helped, sort of. You try to keep the place clean. It's not like you enjoy the filth. You sweep the floor with a bundle of dried twigs. You wash dishes in cold water. You air out the blankets when the sun shines, maybe twice a month in winter. But dirt is part of life. You stop seeing it after a while. Still, there's comfort in routine. You kneel by the hearth, poke at the embers, and add a twig or two. The light flickers across the walls, turning everything golden. The kids squabble over who gets closest. You hush them, toss in a dried herb for the smell, lavender, maybe, or yarrow. A small luxury you grew in a pot last summer. It burns quick, but the scent lingers. Smells like not winter. And that's enough. You glance at the ceiling. There's frost clinging to the inside of the roof. A drip lands on your nose. You sigh and wipe it off. At least it's not raining. Last month, a neighbor's roof collapsed under the snow. Crushed her goat. She cried louder for the goat than her husband when he died. Makes sense. He didn't give milk. Speaking of animals, you check the pen beside the cottage. The cow's breath puffs like steam. She's hungry. Always is. You break the ice in her water bucket and toss her a frozen turnip. She snorts and looks unimpressed. Still, she'll eat it. She has no choice either. Back inside, you adjust the blanket nailed over the door. It's not much, but it blocks the worst of the wind. Your hands are cracked and bleeding from the cold. You rub tallow on them, animal fat saved from cooking. It helps, a little. Smells like yesterday's stew. A smile tugs at your lips. The kids are playing in the corner using sticks as knights and beetles as dragons. Their laughter feels out of place here, like sunlight through storm clouds. You let them play. They'll grow up fast enough. And outside, the cold waits. Patient. Endless. But you've outlasted it this long. You'll do it again. Somehow. You've made it another night. Barely. Your joints ache like rusted hinges, and your nose still hasn't decided whether it wants to thaw or fall off, but you're alive. And right now, that's a small miracle. The first thing you do after making sure the fire didn't die completely is layer up. You don't really get dressed in winter, you just keep adding things until you stop shivering. A linen shirt maybe under a wool tunic, then another tunic, then a cloak. Then an old blanket tied around your shoulders with a piece of twine that used to be part of a fishing net. socks if you have them, which you probably don't. So you stuff your feet with straw again. And here's the thing, none of it works all that well. The wool itches like it's personally offended you. The cloak is damp. The straw pokes through and makes you limp. But you wear it anyway because the cold doesn't care if you're stylish or comfortable. It just wants you still. The kids complain about the layers. I can't move my arms, one whines, swaddled like a badly wrapped potato. You laugh, then immediately regret laughing because your breath fogs up and chills your teeth. Your clothes aren't washed often in winter. Water is too cold, too precious, too much effort. So you all just stew in them. Sweat, smoke, animals stink, old stew, your outfit becomes its own ecosystem. But after a while you don't notice. Or rather, you do, but your brain files it under non-lethal and moves on. One of your neighbors, the miller's wife, once claimed she lined her boots with rabbit fur and never got cold feet again. You tried it. It worked until the fur started to rot. Turns out preserving fur is an art form you haven't mastered. Now your boots smell like expired stew and regret. Still, layering is your best weapon. The wind cuts right through you if you don't bundle up. You've learned to wrap rags around your arms, your thighs, even your neck. You tie cloth over your mouth to warm the air before it hits your lungs. It makes you look like a bandit, but who's going to rob you? You don't have anything worth taking. You add a belt, leather, cracked but functional. It's not for fashion. It's to keep all those layers from slipping off while you're bending over to tend the fire or break ice off the well. Medieval tailoring is basically just try not to fall apart. Historians still argue whether most peasants made their own winter clothes or bartered for them, but in your case, it's definitely homemade. You've spent hours by the hearth, patching holes with twine and muttered curses, squinting by firelight to stitch another elbow or knee. Sometimes you use dog fur. Seriously, it sheds in tufts, and you collect it, spin it with wool, and boom, new mittens. Warm, kind of. Slightly weird, but effective. You once heard that Viking women used cat fur for gloves. Sounds cozy, but good luck getting a cat to sit still for that. Speaking of gloves, you don't have proper ones. Just hand wraps, long strips of cloth that you wind around your fingers like you're boxing the weather. Not perfect. Your fingertips still go numb sometimes, but they're better than nothing. A cousin once tried to make mittens from an old leather saddle. The result looked like a medieval crab costume. But his hands stayed warm, and now everyone asks for crab gloves when the frost gets brutal. You bundle up the kids and send them out to fetch water. They complain, of course, but the well isn't far, and they need to move. Staying still is a slow death out here. You tell them it'll wake them up. They say they'd rather stay asleep. They come back red-faced, coughing, with half a bucket sloshed out. But the water's not frozen solid yet, and that's a small win. You pour some into a pot to warm for breakfast. Breakfast being, as usual, yesterday's barley mash with a hint of wood smoke and disappointment. Outside, someone's chopping wood. The sound rings sharp across the frozen fields. You pause, listen. It's oddly comforting. Proof someone else is out there. Proof someone else is fighting the same fight. You think about cloaks again. A good wool cloak is worth more than a pig, especially one lined with fur. You don't have fur. You have patches, old scraps sewn together into something vaguely cloak-shaped. The wind still finds a way in. Some folks wrap their legs in straw, not just their shoes, everything star. You've seen shepherds walk into church rustling like scarecrows. It's not dignified, but neither is frostbite. You know the signs now. The pale, waxy skin, the tingling that turns to nothing, flesh that turns hard like candle wax. You've seen toes turn black. Once, a woman lost the tip of her nose. It just fell off, like a leaf. You were 10. You never forgot. So, you check your fingers, your toes, your ears, every night. Press them, rub them, talk to them like needy pets. Still there? Good. Someone else farts into the fire and blames the dog. You all laugh so hard, you wheeze. For a few seconds, it's warm again. As that's the truth, your clothes don't really keep out the cold. But they try. And so do you, every single day. Your breath catches the moment you step outside. It feels like the air itself slaps you, sharp, dry, and cruel. The sky's that washed out white gray that never seems to change, and everything's quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind that makes you wonder if the world has given up. And yet, you have things to do. Your chores don't stop just because your eyelashes are freezing together. Survival doesn't take snow days. First stop, the animals. You trudge across the frozen yard, boots crunching through snow like you're stepping on broken pottery. The chicken coop looks like a bread box buried in white. You pry open a crooked wooden door and duck inside. The smell hits you first, damp straw and ammonia. But the hens cluck weakly, alive, thank goodness. They're huddled together in a feathery lump for warmth. One stares at you like it's your fault she was born into this. You toss them a handful of grain if you have any left, or maybe some old porridge. No egg today. They barely lay in winter. Too cold. Too dark. You don't blame them. You grab the bucket and head for the pig pen. Pigs snort at your approach, steam curling from their snouts. They're smarter than they look, those pigs. Know exactly when you're bringing scraps. You dump the slop into the trough and rub one's ear. She leans into it, warm and solid. For a second, you think about the salted pork hanging in the kitchen and try not to feel guilty. You remember last year when a snowstorm blocked the door and you had to tunnel your way out. The pigs were fine, burrowed down in the straw like big pink embers. You were the one in danger of freezing. That morning, your hair froze to the wall. You cut it loose with a bread knife. Back to the barn now, if you have one. Not everyone does. You're lucky if you've got a structure to keep your cow from turning into a milk-flavored ice sculpture. The roof leaks, the latch sticks, but it's shelter. You break the ice on her water and pat her flank. She smells like sour hay and safety. You'll brush her later, if your fingers warm up. The field is a wasteland. Nothing grows now. Just snowdrifts and brittle stalks poking out like ribs. Farming in winter? That's a joke. The earth is asleep, frozen solid like iron. You rely on what you stored during the harvest, if you had a good harvest. If not, well, it's going to be a long winter. You head toward the storehouse, or what passes for one. It's just a half-buried hut with stones piled around the sides to keep it insulated. Inside, turnips, onions, dried beans, salted fish, maybe a wheel of cheese if the rats didn't find it first. Everything's covered in frost, even the inside of the roof. You grab a few root vegetables and mutter a quiet wish that mold hasn't made it into the bottom crates. You once bit into a carrot in February and found it hollowed out by bugs, dried and desiccated like a vampire snack. You ate it anyway. You boiled it until it begged for mercy. Back home, you set the food by the hearth. The kids are still bundled up like little sleep-deprived burritos. Your spouse is poking at the fire with a stick, trying to coax it into cooperation. You join them, shoulders touching, shared warmth. It helps. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had predictable food shortages or if winter starvation was more sporadic. Depending on local climate and lordly competence, you mumble aloud, mostly to yourself. Your partner just grunts. You've said weirder things before breakfast, and you have rations, or had them. Barley and oats in sacks you hung from the ceiling to keep out the rats. You keep checking those sacks like a nervous parent. If they go bad, you've got nothing but thin soup and vague hope. Sometimes you mix sawdust into the flour, just a little, just enough to stretch it. You heard of a family that used ground bark from pine trees. Gave them the runs, but they said it was worth it. Your neighbor swears by bone broth. Boil a pig's knuckle until the marrow melts, then toss in whatever you've got. Tastes like licking a medieval boot, but it keeps you alive. Kind of. You head back outside to fetch more firewood. Your pile's shrinking fast.
Each log you burn is a gamble. Will you have enough to last till thaw? You think about burning furniture, then shake your head.
You already did that last year. The bench in the corner used to be part of a chair. One winter, you burned your fence, then had to chase a goat halfway across the countryside. Not doing that again. You spot your friend Tom down the lane. He's dragging a sled full of kindling. You wave. He waves back, face wrapped in cloth, eyes rimmed red from windburn. You two trade stories when you meet at the well.
Last week he found a frozen weasel in his loft.
Considered cooking it, decided against it.
The weasel's now a sort of house mascot.
Inside again, finally. The fire's going, the stew's bubbling, the kids are poking each other with spoons. You sit down, pull off your gloves, and watch your fingers return to color. You made it through the morning, not without effort, not without cold creeping under every doorframe, but you made it. And there's always tomorrow.
Afternoon arrives, but you wouldn't know it from the light. The sun is barely a rumor behind thick clouds casting the village in an endless gray yawn. Still, there's work to do. Always work. You decide to mend the roof. Yes, in winter. Because last night, snow started drifting in through a hole near the chimney, dusting your sleeping mat like icing sugar on stale bread. And if it snows into the house too many times, well, you're going to end up with a bed that crunches. Climbing onto the roof is a process. First, you stomp down a path through the snow to the side of the house. Then, you wrestle the ladder out of the snowbank. It's more ice than wood at this point. You prop it up and start climbing, cursing the sky with every freezing rung. Your roof is made of thatch, bundles of straw packed tightly together and pinned with wooden pegs. When it's fresh, it works well. But after a few years of rain and snow and pigeons pooping their life's work into it, it starts to rot and sag. And winter doesn't exactly help. You patch it with whatever you've got, some new straw if you're lucky, or bits scavenged from old bundles behind the barn. You tie it down with twine and frozen fingers, humming to keep your teeth from chattering too hard. A snowflake lands on your eye. You blink, then another. Great, it's starting again. Thatch is surprisingly good insulation, though. You once slept in a house with slate tiles instead. Fancier, sure, but also like living under a frozen dinner tray. A neighbor told you that in some parts of Europe, peasants used turf for roofs, actual chunks of grass and dirt, heavy as sin but warm. Historians still argue whether that practice spread to England or stayed a Scandinavian thing. Either way, you wouldn't mind the warmth, but not the roof caving in. You finish your patch job and clamber down, joints creaking louder than the ladder. Your nose is bright red. Your toes feel like someone replaced them with boiled rocks. Time for some warmth, or something close to it. You re-enter the house, bringing snow with you. It melts and turns the dirt floor to mud. Again. You sigh, remove your outer layers and hang them near the fire to dry. The smell is noticeable, but better than mildew. The children are playing a strange game involving a stick, a lump of wool, and an argument. You watch for a moment, then throw a log on the fire. It hisses angrily. You feel the warmth slowly return to your face like a reluctant guest. Time for some repairs. Winter is prime mending season. There's no field work, no planting, no weeding, just the long, slow drag of surviving. So you sit by the hearth, pull your sewing kit from its hiding place, a pouch under a broken floor tile, and get to work. Your kit isn't fancy.
A few bone needles, a couple with bent tips, some rough thread made from hemp or linen. You've even used hair once. Not yours, horsehair. Strong stuff. Awkward to thread, though. Today it's socks, or what used to be socks. They've worn thin at the heels, sprouted holes at the toes, and look more like fishnets than foot warmers. You darn them with whatever you can find. Wool from an unraveling tunic, scraps from an old curtain, or once, in desperation, string from a cheesecloth. Sometimes you dream of having real winter gloves, made from thick leather, maybe lined with sheepskin, but gloves are for rich folk. You make do with hand wraps and optimism. You fix a tear in your eldest's cloak next. The fabric's stiff from repeated wettings and dryings, but you coax it into place. Stitch by stitch, the world becomes just a little less drafty. A cousin once told you that in some parts of France, women use nettle fibers to spin thread. Surprisingly soft, they claimed. You tried it once, ended up with itchy palms and a deep distrust of weeds. There's not much light, just the fire and a narrow shaft sneaking in through the smoke hole. So you squint and work slowly, humming a tune your mother taught you, something about a fox and a pie. It doesn't make much sense, but it's soothing. Eventually, the children asked for stories. Not songs, those are for evening, but stories to pass the dragging hours. You spin a yarn about a knight who fought a snow dragon using nothing but a loaf of bread and a goat's bell. They laugh. One snorts. You make the dragon burp fire into its own tail. Applause. In winter, stories matter. They keep the dark from swallowing you whole. You tell tales of green summers and bright markets, of magical cloaks that never let you feel cold, of a house with a hearth so big you could walk into it, and no smoke in your eyes. One of the children asks if such places are real. You smile. Say nothing. Let the dream hang in the air. You step outside again as the afternoon dims. Just for a moment, the village is quiet. Smoke rises from every chimney. The dog barks in the distance. Somewhere, a bell rings. The wind has died down a bit. You take a deep breath, cold but clean. You can almost smell the frost. And maybe beneath it, the faintest memory of spring. Maybe. Evening creeps in like a tired cat, silent, slow, and just a little bit sinister. The light fades, what little of it there was, and shadows lengthen across the walls of your cottage. Outside, the wind stirs again, rattling the shutters and brushing against the thatch like a ghost that forgot something. Dinner time, which is a generous term, really. Tonight it's barley gruel again, thickened with a scrap of lard and a chopped up turnip that's seen better days. You stir the pot slowly over the fire using the same wooden spoon you've had for 5 winters. It's more like a wand at this point, carved smooth from years of meals that tried their best and mostly failed. The kids hover close, sniffing the air like wolves. They know not to complain. There's food. It's warm. That's the bar. You ladle the gruel into bowls, rough ceramic ones, chipped and blackened by fire. You eat in silence for a while, only the sound of slurping and the occasional crunch of grit breaking the quiet. That grit might be ash, or it might be dirt from the turnip. Either way, you chew and swallow. You think about the Lord's Hall up on the hill. They're probably feasting. Roasted meats, white bread, ale that doesn't taste like socks. You're not jealous. Okay, maybe a little. But mostly you just want the kind of meal that fills your belly without tasting like wet rope. And yet, this meal warms you. It doesn't excite your taste buds, but it hugs your insides like a rough blanket. Food isn't pleasure, it's permission to keep going. You hand the last bit to the youngest. They eat it like it's treasure. And in this moment, it is. After dinner, the real battle begins. The fire. You crouch in front of the hearth, poking it with your iron rod. It's still going, but barely. Coals glow faintly, like embarrassed embers. You blow gently, trying not to inhale a lungful of ash. A small flame licks up. You feed it a splinter of wood, then another. Slowly it grows, just enough to stay alive. There's no central heating, no radiators, just this one stubborn hearth. And if it dies overnight, you'll wake up with icicles in your hair again. You bank the fire, building it into a little fortress of warmth for the night. Stack a few thicker logs, add some tinder, say a quiet wish to whoever listens to cold peasants with fire anxiety. Once, a neighbor's hearth went out completely. She tried to relight it using coals stolen from a blacksmith's forge. The sparks caught her dress on fire. She lived. The dress didn't, and so fire maintenance becomes part art, part survival ritual. The children start preparing for bed. They unroll the sleeping mats, straw-stuffed sacks that crunch when they lie down. You've mended them a dozen times. You spread out every fur and blanket you have, even the one that smells faintly of goat. Especially that one. Goat fur is magic in winter. There's no privacy. No bedrooms. You all sleep in the same room, like hibernating squirrels in a wooden cave. It's awkward, but warm. Mostly warm. Sort of warm. Before sleeping, there's prayer, or something close to it. A whispered hope. A thank you for surviving the day. A nervous plea that the roof holds, the fire lasts, and no wolves come sniffing around the walls tonight. You lie down last, closest to the door. Not for protection, really. Just in case the fire needs tending, or in case someone knocks, or breaks in, or breaks down. You tuck your cloak over your shoulders and close your eyes. Sleep doesn't come easy in winter. Not when the cold is clever. It slithers between blankets, finds the holes in your socks, nudges your nose like a curious cat. You shift, curl tighter, try to ignore the sound of wind sneaking under the doorframe. You think of your uncle's story about that one winter, the wolf year, when game vanished and the rivers froze solid. People ate pine bark. Some didn't eat at all. You remember the way his face changed when he told it, quiet, distant, like he was still watching it happen. And still, you sleep. It's the kind of rest where your body floats on the edge, always half listening for cracks, creaks, howls. But it's rest, and you need it. Tomorrow is another full day of surviving. And that's not a task for the well-rested, it's a task for the persistent. At some point in the night, you wake to stoke the fire. Your fingers are numb, but you find the poker. Shift the wood. Blow. Feed it like a pet that only eats warmth. The flames catch. A soft light dances across the walls, turning shadows into sleepy puppets. You curl back into your mat and let your thoughts fade again. In some monasteries, you've heard monks wake every few hours to chant, even in winter. They walk barefoot across frozen stones to whisper hymns into the void. You respect the commitment. You'll stick to feeding your fire goblin and muttering half a prayer that sounds more like a yawn. Outside, the wind rises again, the roof groans, the snow hisses across the fields like a million tiny arrows. But inside, you are wrapped in straw, furs, and fatigue, and just enough warmth to make it to morning. Morning again, or something close to it. The sky outside is the same gray blanket, barely different from the night you just escaped. You open your eyes to the scent of ash, damp straw, and that unmistakable peasant perfume, smoke-soaked everything. Your back feels like you wrestled a pig in your sleep. Every joint clicks in protest as you sit up. You rub your eyes, squint at the faint light filtering in through a frost-covered window hole, and check the hearth. Still alive. Barely. A tiny thread of smoke curls up from the embers like a question mark. You sigh and swing your feet onto the cold, packed earth floor. They hit with a slap that says, "Good luck today." Your first job? Firewood. Always firewood. You pull on your stiff cloak and your patched up boots, now more leather lace than shoe, and head outside. The cold smacks your face instantly, no greeting, just a slap. Your breath fogs in front of you like steam from an old kettle. There's a woodpile behind the house, or what's left of it. You start gathering the driest logs you can find, snapping off icy branches and stacking them in your arms. Some are damp, but you can't be picky. You'll dry them near the hearth. Or try. You nearly drop one log on your foot, and in that moment you briefly fantasize about being a baker. Indoors, with warm bread, and no axe. You head back inside, stomping snow off your boots like a grumpy mule. The kids are stirring now, groggy and sniffling. You throw a log on the fire and blow life into it again. It flares up for a second. Success. Time to think about breakfast. And yes, calling it breakfast is generous. It's whatever's left from yesterday, boiled into something that doesn't actively offend your stomach. Today, that means leftover barley mush mixed with wild herbs and, drumroll, a bit of dried apple skin you saved from last autumn. A luxury. You drop it in like it's treasure. As it warms, the room slowly comes to life. You hear the creak of the roof, the whisper of wind through chinks in the wall, the crackle of fire. Someone sneezes, another coughs. You try not to think about illness. You can't afford it. And that's the thing, sickness in winter is a gamble. No doctors here. Maybe the old herbalist lady 2 villages over, but she smells like boiled onions and makes potions that taste like pond water. Still, she's kept people alive more than once. Historians still argue whether her knowledge was true folk medicine or just well-timed guesswork. Either way, she's your best hope if things go wrong. You serve the warm mash, dividing it carefully. Everyone eats silently, faces close to the bowls, steam curling up and fogging your eyelashes. It's not good, but it's hot, and that's enough. After eating, it's chore time. Winter doesn't give you a break. It just changes the menu. Today, animal duty. You head out toward the shed behind the house. The goats are bleeding, probably annoyed you haven't fed them yet. You push open the creaky wooden door and step into the smell of manure, wet straw, and goat breath. One goat gives you a look that says, "Finally." You fork some hay from the stack into their trough. They munch noisily, shaking frost from their ears. You check their water bucket, frozen, of course. You crack the ice with a stick and refill it with snow to melt by body heat. Not ideal, but it'll do. Milking time next. Your hands are cold, and the goat is impatient. You mutter a joke to yourself, something about how you never wanted to be this intimate with a barnyard animal, and get to work. The milk is warm and steaming in the bucket like a small victory. Back inside, the kids are repairing traps. Not the big ones, just the tiny snares you use to catch rabbits or the occasional, very confused bird. You help fix a frayed cord and bend a twig into place. Trapping's tricky in winter. Animals are scarce, smarter, hungrier. But sometimes you get lucky. A rabbit here, a bird there. You once caught a stoat, mean little thing, but tasty after 3 boils. You tell the kids the story again. They laugh at your stoat impression, which involves baring your teeth and squeaking like a kettle. You've heard stories of people up north using fish traps under the ice, cutting holes with bone blades and dangling bait through frozen rivers. Sounds clever, also sounds freezing. You're not sure your boots would survive that long. Midday comes and goes without a bell. Time doesn't mean much here. Just before the coldest part and after the snow gets sharp again. You decide to mend the wall next. A draft has been sneaking in behind the cot, making sleep even worse than usual. You stuff it with straw, mud, and a bit of old cloth. You pat it down with numb fingers and hope it holds. That's the thing about peasant winter work. It's constant, quiet, and completely invisible unless you stop doing it. You stretch your back. Hear a pop that sounds like a small log snapping. You choose to believe that was healthy. You spot your neighbor trudging past outside, dragging something behind her. Firewood maybe, or a pig carcass. You nod. She nods back. No one has energy for long conversations in this weather. You remember last year when someone in the next hamlet over didn't make it through winter. Got stuck under a collapsed roof during a snowstorm. Took them days to dig the body out. After that, everyone started reinforcing their beams. You added 2 extra logs to yours, just in case. The fire is low again. You feed it more. You feed it often, like a child who only eats bark and old wood. Later, you warm the goat milk and mix it with a pinch of dried herbs, nettle, maybe, or something green that's pretending to be nettle. You sip it slowly, and for a moment, it tastes like comfort. Outside, the wind sings a strange, hollow song. You shiver. Not from cold this time, just the memory of what happens if you stop moving, stop fixing, stop tending. Winter doesn't kill you with drama, it kills you with neglect. But not today. You wake up with your face half buried in a wool tunic that smells like smoke, sheep, and something vaguely oniony. Your breath rises in little clouds, and the fire is nothing but a pile of orange crumbs in the hearth. You don't move at first, just lie there, wrapped in cloak and straw, listening to the world beyond the walls. It's snowing again. The wind hisses under the door and scratches the thatch like claws. Outside, the world has gone soft and muffled. Every noise is wrapped in white. You sit up, stretch your back, and crack your neck like a frostbitten tree. The warmth from sleep disappears instantly, replaced by the sharp, cruel bite of morning chill. You shuffle over to the hearth, blow on the embers, and add a few splinters from the kindling basket. A spark catches. That's all you need. Soon the fire coughs itself awake. You whisper, thanks to whatever spirit of warmth was listening. Breakfast is weak today, mostly boiled grain water with a couple of shriveled beans. You chew slowly and try not to count how many meals are left before you'll have to start begging or trading for more. The animals get fed next. The goats look at you like you've offended them personally by being late. You fill their trough with hay and check their hooves, cracked but still sturdy. The hens haven't laid anything today. Again, you scowl at them. They scowl back. You remember the old story. If a hen stops laying eggs in winter, whisper a curse from your left side and hang nettle over her coop. It's nonsense. But you've done it. Twice. You catch your reflection in the water trough. Chapped lips, hollow cheeks, and that beard fuzz that refuses to grow properly. You look like someone who once lost a fight to a door. Back inside, you repair another snare. Yesterday's catch? Nothing. The day before? Half a rabbit. You shared the bones with the dog down the road. He left you a stick in return. Fair trade? Your neighbor stops by near midday. She brings a small basket, apples dried. Not many, but enough. You thank her and offer some of your best, a tiny pouch of salt you've been hoarding for months. Salt is gold in winter. She eyes it, takes it, nods. No words needed. While she's there, she asks the question everyone dances around. You hear the miller's boy's gone. You freeze. He wasn't that young, 15 maybe, but he'd been looking pale for weeks. They said it was just a cold. Now he's just gone. You don't answer. Just chew your lip and nod. These things happen, quietly, without ceremony. Later, you help repair a fence near the woods. It's a group effort. 3 families, 4 hammers, and more than a few cold fingers. The fence keeps in the goats and keeps out the wolves, in theory. But honestly, if a wolf wants in, a few planks of rotting wood won't stop it. Still, it helps you feel in control. And that's something. You hear a tale while you work. One of the old men swears he saw lights in the forest last night, dancing, blue, flickering like fireflies made of frost. He says they're the spirits of wanderers who froze in the snow and now lure others to join them. You laugh, but not too loud. You know someone who followed strange lights once, got lost, came back wrong, didn't speak for days. Historians still argue whether that was hypothermia, trauma, or some deeper madness. You just know he doesn't go near trees anymore. That afternoon, you take a walk to clear your head. You bundle up like a walking cabbage and crunch your way through knee-deep snow. Each step is a test. Will the ground hold, or will you sink into some invisible hollow? You pass the edge of the village where a frozen stream runs like a white scar through the woods. You stop there and sit on a flat rock. The cold seeps up through your bones, but the silence is worth it. There's a stillness out here that borders on sacred, the kind of quiet that makes you forget your aching back and your sore hands, the kind of quiet that reminds you the world is bigger than your cottage and your chores. You see a squirrel dart across a branch, fluff thick, eyes wild. You almost feel like bowing in respect. He's surviving too. You walk back slower. Every breath is a cloud. Every step leaves a mark that will vanish within hours. As dusk slides in, your body screams for warmth. You throw more logs on the fire, open the chest, and pull out one final root, a soft, bruised parsnip. You boil it with a few wild greens and pretend it's stew. You add a dried apple slice for sweetness. It's the kind of meal that would make a noble spit in a bowl, but for you, it's a win. The children are quiet tonight. It warms the room almost as much as the fire. Later, while the rest sleep, you stay up a little longer, just watching the flames. Just listening to the creak of the roof and the sighs of sleeping breath. You reach into the small pocket sewn into your cloak. Inside is a sliver of candle wax, no wick, just enough to remind you you've still got something left for emergencies. You clutch it like a prayer. The snow outside keeps falling. The cold keeps pressing. But inside, for now, you're warm. For now, you're still here. You wake with a start, the sharp scent of smoke pulling you from a restless doze. The fire's alive, but low, like a heartbeat barely beating. You breathe out, watching your breath fog the cold air and stretch muscles that feel as if they've been wrestling icicles all night. Outside, the wind has switched moods. No longer the whispering ghost of yesterday, it's now a biting howl that rattles the shutters and slaps snow against the walls like an angry fist. You pull your cloak tighter and step outside. The sky is a bruised purple, and the snow piles higher, turning familiar paths into forgotten trails. Your boots crunch hard on the ice crust, making you wonder if you're stomping on frozen bones of last winter's dreams. Your first stop is the communal well at the village center, a frozen monument to the lifeblood of summer. You poke and prod at the ice surface with your staff, listening for the telltale hollow sounds beneath. It's hard work and a little dangerous. The ice can give way underfoot, swallowing you into a watery tomb that no cloak or prayer can save you from. You pause, heart thumping, and swear to yourself you're not in the mood to drown today. With a long pole, you break through the thick ice, chipping carefully until the water bubbles up, dark and slow. You dunk a bucket in, careful not to spill, and hoist it back up, the frozen rim biting your fingers despite your gloves. The water will freeze fast once inside, so you immediately carry it back to the hearth to warm and store.
Nearby, the village's communal oven is huffing out puffs of steam, an oasis of warmth and the promise of something edible beyond boiled roots and mush. You drop off your water and head to the oven. You're not baking bread that's saved for special days when flour isn't a precious dust.
Today, the oven is for communal cooking, a stew made from preserved meats, root vegetables, and whatever herbs have survived. You listen to the murmur of neighbors sharing stories, gossip, and grumbles. One old man complains about the new lord's taxes, though winter makes the idea of extra burdens almost criminal. You sidle closer, catching scraps of a debate about whether the Lord will actually send grain this year or just empty promises. Historians still argue whether these medieval taxes were ever fairly enforced or mostly a joke that peasants paid anyway. You keep your mouth shut and nibble on a crust of hard bread someone passed you. Back home, you check on the animals. The goats are restless. The cold is making their milk thin. You try singing a little, a foolish thing, but it seems to calm them. You remember a strange old superstition about singing to animals in winter to keep their spirits up. Quirky, maybe, but it works for now. Your hands ache from the cold and work, but there's no time to rest. You have to fix a broken wheel on your cart, essential for hauling firewood or food when the roads thaw. You pull the cart into the yard and start stripping the frozen axle, grunting with each wrench turn. The wheel wobbles dangerously, held together by rust and prayers. As you work, your mind drifts to the legends told in the village. Tales of winter travelers trapped in the snow, saved only by secret tunnels under the forest. Some say these tunnels were built by monks centuries ago, others that they're natural caves. Historians still argue whether these stories are fact or fiction, but everyone agrees they add spice to otherwise bleak winters. The cart repair is slow, frozen bolts creaking and complaining. You almost lose a finger when a stubborn nail snaps. By midday, you're exhausted and hungry again. You sit on the stoop and nibble on a dried fish someone traded you last market day, a rare treat. It tastes like the sea and a distant memory of warmth. In the afternoon, you help patch a neighbor's roof. They've been sick and can't climb. You haul bundles of straw up and shove them into gaps, cursing the cold that makes your fingers numb. The sky darkens early now, the sun, a weak lantern, soon snuffed out. Inside, you light the last of your tallow candles and prepare for evening. Dinner is a thin soup, potatoes, parsnips, and some scraps of salted pork. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth. The kids are restless. You pull out the bones again for another game. This time, the youngest giggles when you make a bad throw and the cubes scatter like snowflakes. You smile, thinking of brighter days. Outside, the wind moans like a lost soul. You close the shutters tight and lay down, feeling the weight of winter pressing in again. But tonight, you sleep with a little hope. The final days of winter arrive like a slow exhale, the cold still present but softened, as if the earth itself is preparing to wake. You wake early, feeling the faintest tug of warmth through the frosted windowpane, and for the first time in weeks, the sun lingers a little longer in the sky. You step outside, the snow beneath your feet crusted and cracking, revealing patches of hard earth dreaming of spring. The village stirs with cautious energy, faint laughter, shouts, and the rhythmic pounding of tools as people ready for the thaw. You help haul the last of the firewood into barns, your hands raw but steady. The animals seem lighter too, more lively, sensing the change. As the days lengthen, you notice small signs of life. A brave crocus peeking through snow, birds chirping tentative songs, and the distant trickle of water where the ice has begun to melt. Winter's brutal grasp begins to loosen, but memories linger, the endless toil, the hunger, the sharp bite of frost against skin. You gather with neighbors around the fire one last time before the great thaw. Stories flow, This time filled with hope and plans for the coming planting season. You share a joke about your infamous winter stew, and laughter rings clearer than it has in months. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly faced worse winters than we imagine, or if the stories are softened by the passage of time. But one thing remains clear: their resilience was extraordinary. As night falls, you lie down, wrapped in thick blankets, the fire's warmth a gentle pulse beside you. Outside the wind is quieter now, a soft sigh carrying the promise of spring. You close your eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of life returning. The long, harsh winter is ending. Sweet dreams. I will meet you tomorrow.